Hello YouTube. This is going to be a tutorial on how to create a typewriting effect of any string that you want in Unity. So let's say I was trying to create a Unity game based on the movie Apollo 13, directed by Ron Howard and starring Tom Hanks, Bill Paxton, and Kevin Bacon as the three men in the spaceship. Don't know exactly what the game is supposed to be. Maybe it's a you can get to the moon if you don't mess something up, you can get there. But this is the type of typewriting effect I'm talking about, where you open the file and it spells out each character, and then this one there's italicized. So the way to go about this, what I'm going to do is create a new scene, call it type, and this is the typewriter script that I'm going to create, so I'll just delete it so we can start fresh. And we will go into our new scene, empty. So what we're going to want to start with is a new C# script called Typewriter, or whatever you want to call it, really doesn't matter. And we'll open that up in Visual Studio, or Mono Develop, that's what it's called. Reload. Okay, so we have our base class here, and we're not going to need start, but we are going to use update, because this is going to be based on frame rate, not coroutines. So basically it's going to unload characters at your frame rate. So if you have 30 frames per second, it's going to be called an update, so it's going to be called every frame. So you're going to unload 30 characters a second essentially. So we're not going to delete update, but we're going to add in a namespace using Unity Engine.ui because we're going to be working with UI text elements. So we're going to need a few variables, and we're going to make them public so we can just drag and drop them from the scene. And we're going to say the displayed text. This is what you're going to actually see in the scene. And then your input text. This is going to be back behind the scenes, feeding the string into the process. And then we're going to want a private string output string, and set it equal to null. And this is going to be what is actually seen, so it's going to feed in the input text through a function and output this string, which is going to add character by character this input string. And then we're going to need a private integer. We'll call it I because we're going to use it for indexing our characters, and we'll start at -1, and you'll see why in just a second. And we're going to say a private bool and call it done because we want to stop feeding it in, characters once we reach the string's end. So now we're only going to use one custom function in this, and it's going to be private, returning a string. We'll call it typewrite, and it's going to take in the string, and we'll call it text. And it's going to return, outputs. Oh, that says sting, not string. Okay, output string. In the end, it'll return this output string that we started with. So now the first thing we're going to do is get the character array. So this is going to be how we get character by character our output. So we're going to call this characters to be very generic, and it's going to take whatever text input that we give the function, and it's going to send it to a character array, and we're going to store it in this characters variable. And then next we're going to say our output string is equal to our output string plus characters I dot to string, because if you just do each character by itself, oh, it works. That's fine. But we'll do to string just for fun. It doesn't have any impact, I guess. So now what this is going to do is take our characters one by one and add it to the string. But the problem is that our integer is -1, first of all, and that's going to throw an indexing error. And two, that it's going to be -1 every single time its function's called. So we need to increase the function by 1 every time. So that's why it's at -1, because the first time it runs through, it goes -1 plus 1 to 0. So we start at 0, our first integer, or our first entry, and then every time it runs through again, it'll go up 0, 1, 2, 3, all the way up to, now we need a cutoff point, because if you don't have a cutoff point, it's going to hit, say the end is 10, I is 10, it's going to return, and then it's going to go 11, and then it's going to try to do characters, the 11th entry, or I guess characters 11 will be the 12th entry, and it's going to throw an out of range error because that doesn't exist, and it's going to do that for every single time this is called after that. So that's why we have this bool here. If I equals characters dot length -1. This is going to be the last character in the array because it goes from 0 to length -1. So if it is the very last entry, we're going to say done is true. We're done going through this function. Now we need to go into our update function and actually call this function. So we're going to say if we aren't done, meaning that we still have characters to add, our displayed text, now this is the text object, then you go dot text to get the actual text component of it, is equal to typewrite, and then we're going to pass in input text dot text. So that looks like it's good. So let's go back into our Unity and let's create all the objects we need. So we're going to create an empty object and call it our typer. That's going to hold our function here, or our script. And we need the displayed text and the input text. So let's create a UI text element, and we'll call this input. Oops, there's no E in input. Okay, and so let's say this is going to be Apollo 13. Oh, where is, okay, here he is. And let's center it and drag it down a bit. Okay, so, and let's just make it a little bigger and color it white, just make it easier to see on this background, and center it. Perfect. So now we're going to type all of our stuff in here, however we want to order it, and Tom Hanks, Kevin Bacon, and Bill Paxton. So that's all the data we want to enter, but it doesn't look very good. It's all just plain, and you can't tell where, other than the fact that these are names, you can't tell like this is a title and this is a name. So it looks better if we italicize it, and you can italicize it using these markup that looks like HTML tags. I is italicized. So let's say we're going to put all of these into italic braces, and when you okay, so you open it with brackets or angle brackets, I close bracket, and then you've put in whatever you want italicized, and then you do this slash, and that closes it out. So that's what our input is, but we don't want our input right here. So we're going to duplicate it, and we'll call this duplicate output. And now we're going to take our input, we're going to select it here, and we're going to drag it way off scene because we don't need it in the scene. And our output, we don't want to have anything at first, so we'll delete it because our output's going to fill in by character. Now that's set. Now we got to go back to our typer and drag in our output text, our displayed text, and our input text. Now let's see how it does. Okay, see now it fills it in exactly how we want it, but you can see that when it hits those angle brackets, it breaks the italics, because if you were seeing while I was typing it, it only works when they're properly paired opening and closing. Otherwise, the entire thing breaks. So you see it'll go back and forth. Every time it opens, it'll break. Every time it closes, it fixes and opens and fixes and breaks itself again, over and over, which looks terrible when it's unloading. So there's a simple way to fix this. What we're going to do is we're going to take our input text and we're going to duplicate it. And we're going to take this one and we're going to change its name to italics. And then we're going to drag it away. And we want to make sure we know which one's which. So italics is on the bottom because input's above it in hierarchy, so italics is below it. That makes sense. All right, so now we're going to want to take our input and delete all of our tags. You may be mad that I made you put them in just to take them out, but it looks better to show this way. So now it unloads how we had it before, but it's still plain. So now we have to figure out how we're going to make it italics without looking terrible. So let's go back into our script, and what we're going to do is we're going to add another text object, call it another public text, because we just want to drag and drop, and this is going to be italic text, and then we're going to want another bool, private bool changed. Now what we're going to do is, instead of loading in the italicized text, we're going to load in all of the text unitalicized, and then the last step just italicizes everything you want. So it like loads in normally, and then it just like one instant shifts, and it looks pretty cool. So now it's very simple. You add this italic text and the changed bool, and then we just go into our update function. If it's not done, it updates our text, and then it sets it to done, and then it doesn't run this ever, or keeps running this line over and over. If it's not done, if it's not done, but it is done. So we're going to add an else statement, because when it is done, we're going to want to change our text, and we're going to say, if we haven't changed our text yet, we're going to say that the display text dot text, which is the actual text, and then it's going to equal italic text dot text. And then we have to say changed equals true, otherwise it'll reduce our performance by running this whole thing over and over and over. It'll just go else, if, and then it'll just go back and forth between these two because it is changed. So let's go back into our scene and go back to our typer object and drag and drop our italic text back into the script, and let's play it and see what happens. There we go. So it loads it all in regular up and down orientation, and then at the end shifts it all to the italics. So if you found this helpful, let me know. And if you want to know how to do it with coroutines instead of the update function, a coroutine would allow you to control the speed at which the characters unfold. And in my imagination, that's how it should be written. So you can choose, say, characters per second, and then it'll unload that many characters, because this unloads at your frame rate. Let me know if you want that done, and I can work on it. I have an idea of how it should work, but I haven't really typed it up and looked at it. So that's the main tutorial, but there's some other things if you want to do. I'm not going to go into too much detail, but I can show you where you would do some things, such as if you wanted to add a typewriting, like actual sound effect every time, you would do that here. So let's say we have a private audio clip, call it whatever, type sound, and then, or we'll just make it public to make it super easy. And then we'll say we want a public audio source and say source. So what it would be very easy to do is say, what we would do is, let's say we have an audio clip. Do I have an audio clip somewhere? Somewhere quick. Let's go find one. Okay. And then let's go here, assets, and we'll paste this asset into our new thing. So now we have this asset here. What we're going to have to do is actually create a resources folder. And this is actually the Xbox achievement sound. So we're going to create a resources folder because that's how we use the resources.load function. And so we're going to put in the resources folder. Now let's go back here. Actually, we don't need to use resources.load because we made it public. No big deal. So let's create an audio source. Call it source. And we'll put it as a child of the canvas and reset its position just to make it fun. Don't think it has any effect in a 2D environment, but okay, so let's put the volume down to like half, and our audio clip, silly me, we don't even need to use the other thing. We don't, oops, wrong one. We don't even need this right here. We can just drag and drop our clip into the source, and since we're never going to change it, it doesn't matter. Play on awake, we don't want that, and loop, we don't want that. So basically all you would do is say source.play, and it would just play it every single time. So let's see how that sounds. Oops. Oh, gotta go in here and drag and drop our audio source into its proper place. Oop. Interesting. Only played it once. Or actually, the reason this isn't really going to be good is because it's not a very fast sound. It's pretty delayed in the way it. So you have all this delay at the beginning. The way it, if say like this was the very, very first like second, like the very, very first millisecond of this, it would play. But basically, it's going at a frame rate of say like, I don't know, 30 or 50 right now. So it's going to cancel the first one and play a second and then third and then fourth. It's going to replay, it's going to cancel and play over itself. And since this doesn't happen instantly, the sound is never going to play fully through. So if you had a sound and you want to do it this the frame rate, if you had a sound, it would have to be like essentially 1 over your frame rate in length. So if you have 30 frames per second, it needs to be 1 over 1/30th of a second long for it to play out fully. Or it could be smaller, shorter than that. But yeah, that's how you would do it. Thanks for watching.